Good evening and welcome to DarkHour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and tonight we've got quite the treat for you folks out there in YouTube land. I have a very special guest with us. We're going to be talking about ghostly encounters, the fairy realm, and whatever else comes up in between. All right, folks, thank you for joining us this evening. As I mentioned, we do have a very cool and special show for all of you tonight. But before we get into it, I'm going to give a quick roll call here. Rick's Realm. How we doing, buddy? Carlo, I love your name. Shannon Sullivan, nice to see you, love. Daz Sola, again, I know who you really are, pal. And of course, GutterGawker's in here with us, and I think I might have covered everyone there. Martin Reeder, what's up, buddy? Nice to see you, man. Long time no see, huh? I think I saw you at 3 different shows yesterday. All right, without further ado, folks, I'm going to bring GutterGawker and Tessa onto the show. We're going to get things started here, folks. Let me just pop up everything, and we should be good to go. Whoops.
Hey, everybody.
How we doing, guys? Welcome to Dark Hour.
Doing awesome.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Excellent. I love to hear it. We're excited to have you, to be honest with you.
Sorry.
As I mentioned, I think I'm just going to jump right into this here. Tessa, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what your first paranormal experience was, what led you into the field you're into today? What brought you there?
I've had a life full of paranormal experiences, beginning back east in Arkansas. As a baby, me and my sister, we would play at the foot of this old guy, and I have little flashes of him here and there, but he was in coveralls, gray hair, and he'd just sit in the rocking chair while we played on the porch. As we decided to move out, it was like a little earthquake happened at our house. All the dishes and everything started coming out of the cupboards, and the whole house was shaking. So he was pretty upset that we left. I'm thinking this guy was perhaps a family member of ours. After that, we saw a fireball. There was a lightning storm, so the power got knocked out. And so we're sitting around just talking, telling stories and whatnot. And my mom tells us to all be quiet. And of course, as a little 4-year-old, I'm like, what's going on? And all of a sudden we see this fireball across the road, and there's a T in the power line, and you can see this fireball there, and it just shoots at the house and slaps on the front porch and disappears. Wow. And she's like, be quiet, you have to be quiet. And I'm asking why, what's going on? And then all of a sudden this fireball pops up through our floor, and she covers my mouth, and it goes into the hallway where the kitchen dining room is, and then shoots down the hall where my brother was. He had gotten the laundry out of the dryer so it wouldn't wrinkle. And as he was coming out the door, I guess it's attracted to sound or movement, but it shot towards him and then out the back wall, which we lived in a brick house, and we didn't see it again. I think that was more of like an elemental thing. Mm-hmm. My very, very first experience that stuck with me my whole life was about a week or so before my mom got into a car accident. And I've always had issues going to sleep, staying asleep, and due to night terrors and such. And so I'm laying awake, everybody else is in bed sleeping, and I'm watching the lights. Excuse me, the lights bounce off of the hallway. We had one of those beer clocks with the flowing river, and all of a sudden I hear these footsteps, and it sounded like someone wearing high heels. And it's getting closer and closer, and I'm wondering, who is it? Because my mom, she'd gone to bed, and I must have blinked. She could have gotten past, and so I'm calling out for my mom, and about the 3rd time I call out for my mom, this woman appears in my doorway, and she was wearing a long black veil, a long black lace dress, and 1800s, mid to late 1800 period shoes. The funny thing was she's about 2 inches off the ground. So that made me wonder, like, how is she even making this noise? But she stopped right in my doorway. She slowly turned and looked at me. And then she slowly turned and looked back down the hallway. And then I heard her open my mom's bedroom door and go in and close the door. Huh. I didn't see her again after that, but my sister said she had an experience with her in her bedroom. We lived right off the bend of a highway in Siloam Springs, and it's very hot, very humid. And she turns around. She's playing her Michael Jackson record in her room. She turns around, and this woman's standing there, and she's like, "Who are you? Why are you in my room?" And the lady says, "You need to close and lock your window." And of course, as a teenage or preteen, she continues to argue with her, and she very sternly said, "Close and lock your window." So she did, and went and told my mom what happened. And my mom's like, "Well, I know it's really hot, but let's leave it closed and locked for tonight, and we'll see what comes of it." And it had rained that night. Next morning, there was footprints and pry marks outside of her window. So I think someone had come off the highway and tried to get into the house. So that was my very first paranormal apparition, so to speak.
Oh my goodness, that's one hell of a story. I'll be honest with you. I mean, you have confirmation all over that. I mean, even in terms of personal experience, and you can look outside of that story and say there are just too many things that happened in tandem to ignore. That's really interesting. Do you feel that there's more of a proclivity for spirit to stick around somebody when they had been in the family prior to, or do you feel that some spirits just find individuals that they like energetically or otherwise and kind of stick around? I don't mean attachments in the sense, but sometimes you have a spirit around you, a loving one perhaps, or a friendly one. Do you find that it's indicative of, well, how do I want to put this here? Do you think that someone who has passed on and is, now in spirit is more inclined to be around somebody than someone, spirit perhaps that you meet along your travels?
I think it just all varies. My mom was very gifted. She was able to see and talk to the dead. I'm gifted. My kids are gifted. So I think ours is genetic. I think, a lot of times when people talk about their spirit guides and whatnot, that could be family members that tag along or whatnot. But I find a lot of times just being gifted and you're kind of like a beacon, it travels around the spirit world and they know, so they'll come in and out of your house. When we moved into this house, there was a ghost that lived here and is still here. His name is John, and he died from emphysema, but we do have things coming in and out of the house, I believe, due to us being able to see and hear them.
Interesting. I mean, I've heard, many times that, the gift is sort of passed down, this clairvoyance, intuition, or what have you. And I've seen it in many different cases. In your experience, why do you think that is? I mean, I don't know the answer, and I actually don't really have a guess on that one. It's just something I've always wondered, because my family is the same way too. My mother is very gifted. I also picked up that intuition. Some people I've worked with had talked about there being certain blood in their families that was involved in the priesthood or high level witchcraft in older days. Why do you think that might be?
As far as it being passed down or things?
Yes.
I don't know. There's different theories out there. One that makes sense because you hear about curses and things like that and passed down generation to generation. But when you're subjected to different things, you do get genetic anomalies. It does change your genetic structure. Even being exposed to space changes your genetic structure. So I think it's just a thing as being a human being and the way that you are able to progress, I guess. It's pretty interesting.
Do you think cellular memory might come into play? Yeah.
Huh?
But that's what we're after. Do you think that cellular memory might have any play in that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No, that's good. I mean, it's just something I've always thought about. I never really came up with anything concrete, and I like your answer. Okay, so you got involved, and you were obviously aware of spirit, for many years, from the time you were very young. Now, do you consider yourself a clairvoyant? Do you practice in the sense of giving readings and things like that, or do you just bring that talent into the field? Where do you stand on that?
I don't like to advertise it. When things come to me for people, like I'll tell them, but I don't like to say, "Hey, I'm a psychic," and have people coming to me all the time, constantly for readings. If something comes to me, I'll let you know. But otherwise, I don't like to advertise it. But I do like to use it in the field. Like going on investigation, I like to go in cold and then find what I find, and then compare that to what the actual reality of different situations is. And it's pretty awesome when it lines up and you know, you get that confirmation that this is actually happening and you're not batshit crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's just the first step, because once you realize that what you're experiencing is real, you then go into the second step of discovery and exploration, now convinced that what you've experienced is legit. That's so fascinating. Man, I mean, personally, I tend to say the same thing as you do. I don't use the intuition in the fields anymore because I actually don't go into the fields. And, you know, next time we'll go into why that is. But I've had my experiences, and unfortunately, they weren't always the best. That being said, I mean, spirits will come to me. There have been so many times that, you know, even as a teenager, I'd be walking in the grocery store going shopping for my mother or something, and I'd get this feeling about some woman halfway down the aisle. And I'd hear this message in my head say, hey, go tell her that her mother's all right. No explanation, just go tell her her mother's all right. And I'm, of course, again, a teenager, even though anybody would kind of think this way, more so at that young age. I'm like, no, why would I do that's stupid. I mean, what are you talking about? I have nothing to go on. And I ignored that, you know, a handful of times. And then one time I decided to try it. I said, all right, I'm going to follow this. So I went up to the woman that I saw in the aisle, and I sure enough said to her, hey, listen, I don't know where this is coming from, but I have this message for you. Your mother's going to be all right. And I kind of just stood there and looked at her, and her face melted. And she said, oh my God, thank you so much. My mother's been in the hospital. My whole family has been stressed out beyond belief around her condition. And this is exactly what I needed to hear. And I walked away, still my arms up in the air, didn't know what happened, but I know what you mean. As soon as they come to you, that's when you're going to relay. You're not, you know, sitting down, opening the door. Although I've done that too. I find, you know, in the same vein as you, that, you know, you just allow them to come to you. It's a lot easier of a process, and sometimes even clearer. So that's cool. That's cool. If you don't mind, I mean, I'd like to revisit the paranormal stuff here, but I really want to delve into the fairy stuff. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I just realized my mic was on mute the whole time. I apologize.
That's all right.
Hey, listen, we've had worse things happen. That's okay, man.
I wanted to chime in really quick.
All right. So, yeah, again, the first thing I'm going to ask you, because, again, this is something rare that you get to speak to somebody who has experiences with the fairy realm. Now, have you seen fairies? You grew up with them around you? Maybe they were in your neighborhood, backyard. What kind of interaction have you had with this realm?
I actually haven't had a lot of experience with fairies. When I go outside during the day, even at night, I'll see little glints here and there. And my daughter Nova has even talked about it. Not sure if that's fairy or if that's something else. Growing up, I've seen little people, I've seen goblins, I've seen different things like that. I've never seen a fairy. My friend Glow, who was one of the original team members for Four Corners Paranormal, she actually showed me a picture that she got from her property, but I've never seen them. And it's interesting. We got a case from a woman, and of course we met her away from her house because, you know, entities can be very intelligent and pick up on what the game plan is going to be. So we met her away from the house and heard about all the crazy stuff going on there, things being thrown at her, large dressers and such being toppled over, writing and different things on the ceilings. Just going through a lot of hell with it. Due to the fact that our team's very diverse, we have pagans and other different religious backgrounds in our group. And I'm like, you know, I don't know the first thing about Fae and what to do about it. And luckily a couple girls in our group did. And so they walked them through it. One of the things is you can build like a little, so who knows if they whack down their home or structure or whatnot, go ahead and do a little garden with natural flowers from your area, and take out a plate with, I believe she said, cream, honey, and toast, and put that out there as an offering. So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, that was my first case, and I think our last case with Fae in the area. I've heard a couple stories from different people, but I've never personally experienced Fae, but I believe anything's possible due to all the things that I have seen, so I don't doubt it. But it's really nice to have that input from your team with knowledge of such things and how to appease them or make them happy.
Well, it's always about an offering, and one hand washes the other. Especially when you work with the spirit world, there has to be a balance somewhere, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. And then you can bring in the idea of energy exchanges and things of that nature as well. But it's very respected when you give up an offering. There's more with the intention, I find, that really kind of goes through and helps make that connection. Now, there are many people who have seen ghosts, and there are many people who have witnessed UFOs or even been abducted. How come there are many more people talking about the fairy realm? Why does this seem to be sort of a subcategory in our field?
I'm not sure. I think a lot of people worry about judgment and ridicule with any of it, and so they're afraid to come forward and say anything. And that's why I like what we do, to give a voice to people that feel voiceless or like they're losing their mind, because a lot of times things will happen to one person and not happen to the rest of the people in the house, and slowly but surely it'll start picking up on other people, but it generally starts with one. So it's nice to give them information and background and different ways to deal with things. But yeah, I think it's the judgment and ridicule, and just a lot of professionals out there deal with things like this as well, and if that were to get out, that might hurt their credibility.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a very good answer. I think a lot of people feel that way in many of the different corners of our field. Man, I just had the question. I lost it. Sorry.
Move your head around. You might find it.
Just
keep wonder.
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to tell you that, you've seen UFOs, and I've seen them, and a bunch of people in the chat have seen them, and Michael has seen them. And these UFOs are able to morph and change shape and do different things. So I was thinking, whoever occupies these things, what if they can manifest into whatever they want on Earth? Maybe as a fairy or leprechaun or a goblin. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think anything's possible. Even ghosts are known to appear as something other than what they are. One incident that we had in this house with my daughters, we had actually gone on an actual investigation, not a paranormal one. And so we were in Pagosa, which is about a 45-minute drive from here. And the kids were at home, and my oldest daughter and her friend were in their room, and my youngest daughter at the time, Nova, who's now 16, she had gotten up and went to the restroom, and she said on her way back, she said my dog Gilly, was hiding under the bed and whimpering and growling and acting weird, and she tried to get her to come out. She wouldn't, and as she went down the hallway, she said she saw a tall figure under a white sheet. And she talked about how strange that was to her afterwards. Like, at the point, she was really freaked out, went to tell her sister. Her sister wouldn't look, but her friend did, and freaked out as well because she saw the same thing, something under a sheet standing in the living room. I've heard people talk about different entities appearing as the Reaper, different things that they know that you will relate to or have fear of, just to get a certain reaction out of you. So I wouldn't put it past aliens to do the same.
Makes sense.
And they could be using some sort of mind thing where they're not appearing as such, but to you they look like that.
Even in the physical sense, you read some of the stories and you hear some of people's experiences who have come up against ETs, and whether it's through the government or whether it's through personal experience, a lot of them have mentioned that they have some sort of actual physical device on their person that they can press, and almost like a hologram, they can change into whatever appearance they choose to. And again, that's just on the physical level. Who knows what the ethereal is able to do as well. I remembered my question. Sorry about that. So we go out and we measure in the paranormal field. We have K2 meters, and we use other devices to capture evidence. Do you think that it would be feasible to be able to do something like that with the fairy realm? Do you think we could do that? Is it measurable?
I'm not sure. That'd be interesting to check out and try, though. We're working on getting one of those Connect cameras, and you would think, since they do have a human type structure, that it might pick up the little, pencil figures of the fae or whatnot. Mm-hmm. Even though they don't appear to your eye, they might appear on that, but we haven't gotten it yet or been able to test it. I've heard that sometimes those can be kind of wonky, but it'd be interesting to see. And there's different apps on phones as far as, oh, what was it? TikTok or something. One of my friends was trying to use it at the cemetery the other night, but it was too dark, where it shows the energy or aura off of a person.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh my goodness,
What
my
happened?
camera just went off. And then it wouldn't work because it was too dark. So that was strange.
Huh.
Now, Tessa, while you can still hear us, is she still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Do these
Oh,
fairies? Do these fairies appear as apparitions, or do they appear as flesh and blood type of looking entities?
The picture that I saw from my friend Glow, it looked like you would imagine what a fairy would look like. It had very large wings and a human body, and it also had little antenna on it. And people were making fun, saying, "Oh, that's just a moth or whatever." But moths don't look like that.
Right.
They don't have little human bodies.
It's interesting that they're purported to look like what we think they look like. I mean, I haven't really researched enough in the way of what fairies meant to our history. I mean, you hear about them in fairy tales and so forth, and many people regard them as fantasy, but then there's a whole host of other folks that believe just the opposite. I mean, for God's sake, look at Ireland, you know what I mean? And how they view leprechauns and nature deities of that sort. So there are cultures that really truly believe in these fairies. It's interesting because every time I think about the subject, I always think about the Coddington fairies, I think it was. If you're familiar with that. Yeah, the two girls with the fairies. Now, obviously, we look at these pictures and right off the bat, in this day and age, you can tell what they are. But back then, people, I think, accepted that more readily because, well, one, the war had just ended and there was a lot of that, still in the subconscious of people in conscious minds. And to believe in something more or to distract, I think it was easier to do that. And I think the only reason that even got popular is because it was published at one point saying that these were real fairies. But, this is what people think of when we mention the fairy realm. And I find that more ridicule comes our way when we speak on this than the ghosts or aliens. And I just don't get it. You know what I mean? I just don't get it. Do you think... I'm sorry, go ahead. Yep.
Well, it makes me think, fairy tales and mythology, and a lot of the stuff in mythology and fairy tales ring true to me. And so it's just how you're raised and in your belief system. It's hard for some people to wrap their mind around this world, let alone, the spirit realm and fae and different things like that.
Do you think they can control their environment? Not necessarily, weather activity, but other things that would sort of parallel that. Do you think that they can control, how do I want to say it, the energy of their place? So if you were to walk into a fairy circle, for example, and I think that's usually indicated by a circle of mushrooms that you find in a field. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. If you're to walk through, if you're to walk through something like that, they can feel your presence. Possibly you can feel their presence, but do they have the ability to control environments the way that ghosts do, or they can move things? You mentioned something like that in one of your stories that you're telling us, but we obviously don't know for sure whether that was an elemental or a spirit energy. Do you think that they have that ability? And as sort of a intertwined question, do you think that their world is similar to the spirit world, or do you think it's on a lower or higher vibration within the spectrum? Sorry, I threw a lot at you there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. To me, I would think a higher vibration. I don't know. But as far as them being able to manipulate things and such, I'm sure they use magic or other things to do that. I also heard from another client that lives up north in Colorado, and she moved on to this property, and right away she was having Bigfoot prints, like handprints on her vehicle and smudges on her glass doors, and even at one point it coming into her house. And she had also talked about fairies and how she thinks that fairies and Bigfoot are in league. The fairy is the brain and the Bigfoot is the brawn, and so they work together. But yeah, it's amazing just the different stories that come out that people are telling. And yeah, like I said, anything's possible. I'm not sure. Really, I need to do more studying on Fae.
Hey, Gutter, did you hear that, buddy? Did you hear that? There's a parallel. There's a possible parallel here between Bigfoot and the fairy world. That's really cool, Tessa, to think that they could be counterparts.
I agree. Yeah. I agree 100% with her, because these things, in my opinion, are Deezens, sort of. They're part of the ET realm. I believe that Bigfoot is part of that. You know, like we were just talking about earlier. These fairies and leprechauns could all be part of the same part of it. So yeah, I really agree with that. I really agree with what she's saying there.
Thanks.
That's just really cool. That's really cool. I like that thought a lot, and I'll put some thought into it as we go forward. Do any of the fairies hold a stronger physical presence than another? So, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with Brian Froud in his interpretation of fairies. He's given each one a distinct personality and a position that they preside over. Do you agree with that, first of all? Do you think that that's something that the fairy energy does? They're assigned different jobs, if you will?
That's what I've always heard, you know, growing up with different fairy tales and such. You know, there's tinkers and different, like, everybody's got their different thing. Is there like a hierarchy or royalty, or like how exactly does that work? I'm not sure. Like I said, I need to do some more looking into it. But at this point, I kind of depend on my teammates that do know about this stuff already to ask them. But yeah, it makes sense to me that they would have their different jobs and such.
Is there any evil or bad fairies out there?
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
I'm sure it's possible. I know that if you piss them off, they're pretty mean. But I don't know if there's like a dark fairy and a light fairy or whatnot. But I'm sure it's possible. You hear about dark elves and light elves and things like that. So I don't see why that would vary. But like you're saying, different realms, you know, you hear about the fairy realm and different things like that. Got me baffled.
No, this is the whole point of this sort of thing. We just have conversations. We talk about things. Maybe we learn something from each other, and hell, maybe we discover something together. That's all this is. And you know, we're having a great time. I hope you're having a good time too.
For sure.
Because this is a lot of fun.
Number one rule.
So absolutely. Now, do you think the fairy, and this is sort of along the lines of what we were just talking about, do you think the fairy energy is an entirely separate entity from ourselves, or is it possible that our energy has incarnated in that form in the past?
That is something that my teammates were talking about to this family, about the mother and perhaps the daughter in a past life being fae. And that's why these fairies were attracted to her daughter. Like, they really liked the daughter, not so much the mom. So the mom was getting things thrown at her and different things like that happening. So it's interesting. Like, are they connecting with this little girl, and, you know, any frustrations or whatnot she might be feeling towards her mom, they're acting out? Or did she go out with a weed whacker and whack down their civilization? You know, it's hard to say what exactly happened. I was not part of the team that went to that house to deal with it, because I felt like I would have just been in the way. But it would have been good to go just for the learning experience. But we do catch up on monthly meetings before the whole COVID thing happened, with different things that we come across in different clients' houses and whatnot.
Cool.
But it is very intriguing.
Hey,
what's that?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I just said it is very intriguing.
Hi, thank you.
Hey, Michael, Shannon Sullivan sent us a picture of a fairy. It's set up on the bottom of the screen. You just have to share it.
Sure. We'll pull her up right here. See what we've got.
Can you guys see that? The little fairy by her leg.
I see something.
Is it on the right or the left side?
Why don't you try to do the full screen? It's right there on her thigh.
Let's try
Yeah,
that.
it's a little below her hand.
Yeah, see it right there?
Down on this. Okay.
Cool, right?
Ah, okay. That's interesting.
Very interesting. That's awesome. Thank you for the participation.
Yes, thank you very much, Shannon. That's cool because, we can't see the rest of the picture, but it does appear to be candid. And it looks like something somebody saw after the fact. So, I mean, I like stuff like that, It leaves more questions than answers sometimes, but that's okay, too.
Like we were saying, Michael, it's such a rare subject. It's great that we're talking about it. I really am enjoying this.
Absolutely. Now, in your thoughts, in your opinions, in your experience, what do you think the purpose of the fairy realm is? I mean, you could ask why it exists, but what role does it play in the part of creation? I know I'm throwing a lot of, obscure questions out here, but we're just talking.
Maybe it's to keep balance, without the bad, you wouldn't know what good is, maybe it's partially protecting nature or different places.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure. What do you think?
Well, I've definitely heard the idea that it is protecting nature, that perhaps that's the driving force behind the growth that we see, and it plays a very big part in that. I mean, again, this is just what I've heard. My experiences with fairies is very limited. I have essentially two different experiences, I could say, and one was personal, and the other one was more removed, which I'm actually going to bring up in a moment. But the first time that I really experienced fairy energy, and I've felt more than I've seen, I ended up walking through a fairy garden that somebody had set up in a campground late at night. And as soon as I walked into this area, it was lit with Christmas lights and everything. So you had a nice soft glow. It was very, very calming. You just felt like you walked into what I would describe as a vortex of some sort, where the energy was just different. It was swirling, but very softly. And I sat there in silence, and it felt like just healing. But this was an area known to harbor fairies and fairy energy. And I mean, that was my real experience that I had there. The second one I'm going to bring up in the respect that I don't know if you've heard of anything like this happening before. There was a couple ladies down in Connecticut who owned this beautiful, lush, lavish garden outdoors, and people would come from all over to view it. And they happened to be healers and into the psychic world themselves. And so they attracted a lot of that energy as well. Now, I remember my mother saying, let's go down and check out the garden. I'd like to show you one day. I said, sure. So we decided we'd go on a Saturday. And she said, well, let me give them a call. Back then, we didn't have internet, so we had to use the old landline, if you remember. Give them a call, make sure they're home, that we can come through. So she made the ring. And as she's talking to the woman, her face drops and she gets off the phone. She says, listen, I'm sorry, we can't go. I said, well, why not? What happened? She said, something terrible. I said, well, tell me. She goes, well, a couple nights ago, they had apparently a vortex or a portal on their property as well that they had identified in whatever way they did. She said that something came through this vortex or portal, something negative, and destroyed every single flower in the area in one night. There was nothing inclement in terms of weather. There was no high winds or anything like that they could figure. And they really felt strongly that something came up and sabotaged the entire garden. And they had to close down for quite some time before they could fix the rights and write the fixes to make it up and running again. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Sounds like goblins.
Yeah?
Sounds like something
What's the
negative
difference?
that doesn't like fairies, because goblins are negative, fairies are positive. Something that doesn't like fairies, that's trying to basically destroy them or their civilization or whatnot, their happy spot.
So there's an active duality even within their world. That's very interesting. Huh.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that. I didn't know the goblins were the bad ones. Now I know.
We usually lump all these together because, again, I don't think we talk enough about it.
I'm going to run towards a bunch of fairies. Like, go get them, guys. Help me.
In respect to our history that we very lightly touched upon, are there any reports or solid reports of people working with fairy energy, or not just having random experiences that they see something, but actually actively working with them in the sense of witchcraft or paganism or some sort of nature modality?
I would have to ask my pagan friends.
Were we closer?
Okay,
all right.
I would think that would be possible, being able to work with different realms of nature and energy and such. But I'm not sure exactly how that'd work. But yeah, I'd have to ask my pagan friends. How does this work?
No, that's cool. That's cool. What about varying appearances within the different entities there, the different elementals? I've heard some of them are very small, and I've heard some of them are incredibly tall. Has anybody really kind of put a thumb on that at all? Is the consensus that there's a wide variety of appearances that they can take on in terms of height and other things? Or do you think that's like completely owned by that particular entity, so they not shape-shifting or anything like that?
I would think if, there was a threat or something, perhaps they could use magic and grow larger or appear scary, or like you said, when you walked into that area, you felt the different energy in the vortex. It's pretty interesting how immense the energy can be, and who knows what they can do with it. I don't practice magic or anything, but I believe it's possible, and whatever you have faith in or believe in, you should be able to achieve or do. So it's pretty interesting to think about how they could do that.
Belief is a very powerful thing. I've understood as time goes on. I used to think that somebody had a belief, whatever that is, they just hold that thought. I never realized that people actually, obviously we're creating our experience as we go, but it's more literal than we realize. So somebody who believes perhaps Jesus Christ appeared to them, it could have been a different entity holding Christ consciousness. They appear as Jesus because that's in their belief system. That's what they're comfortable with. Like you're kind of mentioning here, however they depend on manifesting to you is for a certain reason or a certain purpose. Obviously the other ones we spoke on was more of a negative bent, but obviously I think the positive ones could do the same thing. That's very curious.
Yeah, it's interesting too. A lot of different scriptures and such talking about angels, and a lot of people are like, well, that's obviously an alien. Is it alien or is it angel, or is there both? Could an alien be appearing to you as an angel, or are these actual angels? But I believe in demons, so therefore I believe in angels. I've never encountered an angel, but when stuff gets really hairy, I will pull out the St. Michael prayer and use it. I have faith in it, even though I'm not Catholic. I have faith in it, so it works for me.
Well, you imbue it with power and intention, and I think that is something very powerful. Look at power objects. For you, it means something. For me, I may not feel anything, but for you, you can make it work. It's a protection or something along those lines. Intention. That's so cool. That's so cool. Now, the spirit, for all we know, the spirit world itself could just be this entirety where all these things are coming from. People talk about our origins and, where we may have come from in this respect to extraterrestrials and DNA and so forth. I agree with you on that, Tessa. I think that a lot of times people are seeing these really high level ETs that come in the form of what looks like an angel, or perhaps they're so close to light that their physicality is not fully there. Because I've also heard that these physical forms aren't really our signatures. It's the light behind us. And though there are some who pass over and need that help, that guidance of seeing your relatives or friends or familiar faces, there are others who could just see that ball of light and recognize it vibrationally. Someone who's been doing this for many lives or what have you. So that's very interesting. That's very curious. Do you believe in demonic possession?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
And I find it interesting that the Catholic Church now, instead of having, just certain people that are doing it, have translated the possession prayers and such. for exorcisms. They've translated it for every language. So anybody basically that has faith and strength to do it can do it. I've never witnessed a demonic possession. I've been possessed a few times. But I think these are like walk-ins. One in particular, right up the road, and most of my team work muggle jobs. Generally, I'm free, so I went up there by myself. I didn't feel a threat. This place was right in the backyard of an old Catholic church, and pull up. Generally, when I pull up somewhere, I'll get a feeling off of it, but I wasn't picking up on anything. And this lady was about to have a baby, and I brought a kit to her that had frankincense and all kinds of different things in it. Staged her house, showed her how to do it. You have to have intent. You have to put your foot down and really believe, like, this is your house. You are the authority, and this thing does not belong. And so being that I was, in this house full of smoke, I didn't sage or do anything to cleanse myself. When I left, I just had a tourmaline and selenite rock and I believe amethyst in my pocket. Later on that night, I went and changed out of my clothes and into my pajamas, and about 30 minutes later, whatever was there, I believe, followed me home, because I'm less than a mile from there. It's just right up the road. And my husband, the very next day, told me that not only did my voice change, but my facial structure changed, and the different things that I was saying and doing. Like, I broke my $7,000 camera. When I came to, I was in my car driving towards the reservation with no clothes on. And so, of course, I turned around. I got to get back home. Hopefully I don't get pulled over, because how am I supposed to explain this, Got home. My husband and the kids were locked in the master bedroom. So I put my pajamas back on, laid on the couch and fell asleep watching TV. But like I said, the next day he was very genuinely concerned and telling me, like, I know that wasn't you. But it was interesting that it was just a one-time thing with that particular one. But it was very angry, very pissed off that I had tried to help this lady and sold her this kit and showed her how to protect herself and her family. Sometimes things like that'll happen. You'll either get attacked, or sometimes it'll do a little walk-in or whatnot. I don't know how exactly it happens. I never thought it would happen to me, but it did. So I learned from that experience. If I'm compromised in any way, like the night before I went, I didn't get a lot of sleep because I was very excited about going, and so I didn't sleep a lot. And like I said, I didn't take the precautions before or after that I do now. But yeah, that was a learning experience. So I think if spirits can possess you, I mean, I'm sure a demon can do it as well.
I've never had a spirit or demon possess me, as far as I know, but I had one kind of attack me. It was a dark
you'd know
spirit.
It, Dave.
It was a dark
Believe
spirit.
Me. You'd know, buddy. I mean, to describe the feeling is like, the best way I could say it is, if you're walking around your day to day, everything's good, sun is shining, I feel great, like I'm in love or something, and then all of a sudden someone just walked by and threw this wet quilt on top of you. But you just kept walking like you didn't know what it was. And all of a sudden you have this wet quilt on you. And you're like, Jesus.
Well, the time it happened to me, it felt like I was all of a sudden just freezing cold. And then I couldn't breathe. And I had to get the hell out of this house. And I was just, oh my God, I'm so dead cold in the middle of the summer, with somebody just kind of like pushing me out of there. Like, what the hell are you doing here, kid? You're not a demon like me, so beat it, sort of. That's the feeling I got. It scared the shit out of me. I laughed. Sorry for swearing.
No, it's fine. I mean, I wonder why a spirit sometimes lays claim to a place. I mean, I have my theories, especially when it comes to the more ancient ones who are hungry and they're feeding off of some trauma that occurred on the land or the area that they're on. And then there's also the possibility that throughout the time that they've been there, they're actually ushering other spirits in and, manipulating and using them. We found that on investigations as well. But it's just a very curious thing to look at and ask yourself, why these spirits claim such ownership. Now, I understand if some, grandma dies in the house and, maybe she doesn't realize she has passed on, or she's just lightly realizing and not ready to move towards the light yet, which I have understood is okay, completely acceptable for any spirit that crosses over. You can take your time. I understand that, this is my china cabinet. What are you guys doing metal with my silverware? Because there's a miscommunication, or there's a disconnect there between this reality and that reality. But for something to lay ownership to a place, something dark, and then to be able to follow you home, you know what I mean? There's something much more there that I think we're missing, and we're disconnected from what we once knew. It was one of the reasons I brought up the idea of, us working with fairy energies in the past. I'm sure it's been done. I'm sure we were closer to nature. I'm sure that many indigenous people used nature spirits, good and bad, for the way that they were supposed to, and they found a balance and a harmony with it. Whereas today, most of us are like, okay, we want to talk about the light. We want the friendly ones, And then there's a handful of us who go searching for the other one, which, we're a special breed. But that being said, most people want to only experience the positive effects. They don't really want to go down the dark end of it. But if you're really getting into this sort of thing and you really seek to understand it, then you're going to have to experience or research both at some point, because it's just, like you say, part of the balance.
It's very interesting how that happens. Mostly the spirits that we get coming in here are good. They just need help. But we've had several negative ones. There was one that just would hang out in the hallway and would bang on the walls and do different random things like that. He was very angry. There was one that came in that would attack our animals. My dog Gilly, for some reason, they were really onto her. She had been not only shoved into a small shelf space, but one night she was shoved into the toilet, and my daughter Nova is screaming her head off. And being in the military, like the flick of a light switch or somebody just walking in my room, I'll wake up. But for some reason, I didn't hear her screaming. But she's screaming as loud as she can for help. And then her cousin Joe, who's a month older than her, came in. So there's these two teenagers pulling on this little dog. Like, she's only a medium-sized dog, trying to get her out of the toilet. And there's no functional way that she's sticking. Like, how is she stuck in the toilet? This thing, I think, was trying to kill her. And finally, whatever it was, released her. And the kids said they accidentally, like, flung her across the bathroom because they were using such force to try to get her out. But whatever was in our house at that point was not nice at all. And it made me really worry about my kids. If it's attacking my animals, is it going to start attacking my kids? But luckily we were able to somehow get rid of it. But yeah, I've saged in here. I've used Palo Santo and different methods. But to investigate in my own house, I'm really chicken about that because I don't want to amp anything up. So if anything pops up that we have to deal with, we do, but we don't go around investigating and
what a mean bastard ghost going after a poor little animal like that. That's not cool.
Yeah, animals have that psychic sense. Like, they're able to pick up on different entities and spirits and such in your house. You'll see it about cats, dogs, even knowing, before you get home that you're going to get home. So yeah, I think that pisses them off when they've been spotted and something's onto them. Yeah, I think it really agitated it.
What's up, Green Man? The opposite of that, Tessa, is I used to stay in a place in Logan Square, and it had a mean cat, a mean dead cat, who would always attack me. I would wake up in the middle of the night with tons of scratches all over me. And I had the window open one night. It was hot, and I felt like this thing jumped through the window. It was like a cold spot, like a little cat cold spot, jumped on me, jumped through the apartment, knocked all my stuff off the walls, and like it took off. But every night it would scratch the crap out of me. I couldn't understand it. What does it mean, Tessa?
I don't know. Maybe it was hungry. Why would it come into your house and attack you? That's so strange. And
I'm just thinking it's probably a dead ghost that used to live there, and it was a mean little bastard.
Yeah, it could have been its house. Cats are very protective. My neighbor Lisa has a cat named Tiger, and when she goes to house sit for somebody, she had asked my daughter to go down and feed her cat, and they were actually trapped in the house because the cat was trying to attack them and had them cornered and wasn't going to let them go. So we had to go down there and get the kids out. But they can be very scary. Like, although they're small, their claws and teeth are very, very punctury and pokey.
Now, I want to say something very quickly. This is something that everybody that's with us tonight knows, I'm sure. But for anybody who watches this cast after the fact, I just want to put this out there. Ghost hunting and putting yourself in those situations is actually very dangerous. You don't really know what you're getting. I mean, some people will say that's half the reason they're there, but it can go the other way, and it can affect your life in negative ways if you find the right thing. And sometimes you're not even looking for that thing. So just to put that out there, there are consequences to this sort of work. And as the workers that we are doing this, we accept that to some degree, but you will sometimes come up to complications. Now, as Tessa mentioned, she used protection. And I'm a very big advocate of doing whatever you can beforehand too, but sometimes that won't even be enough. And you'll still find yourself in a situation where you need to expel something. So I just want to put that out there. I remember there was a story, and I'm going to be fuzzy on the details because it was quite some time that I read it. There was a guy in Europe. He was a big paranormal show host. I really can't remember his name. I will find it and I'll put it in the description after the show, guys. But this guy, I think, was affiliated with TAPS in some way, shape, or form. But he had some ungodly number of episodes in places that he had gone to, and he was always after whatever he could find. Now, the story goes that he came back from investigation and he started acting a little bit differently. He became more secluded, wouldn't talk much to his family. And his wife started getting concerned, and she would ask him what was wrong. He's like, nothing, nothing, nothing. Finally, he says, listen, there's a darkness after me, and I can't get it off. It's too strong. I can't get it away from me. And this is where, again, it's dangerous, man. This guy was attacked in his bathroom, and he passed away as a result of being strangled. And when they found him, there was this whole big thing where, he was up there using the bathroom, taking a shower, and, people heard scuffling going on upstairs, but they didn't think much of it. They were having breakfast or something like that. When he didn't emerge, they went up there and found him either almost dead or he was passed away, but he had these big black strangulation marks on his neck that nobody really could place. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard anything about that. I never heard anything about an autopsy or anything afterwards. But these things can happen. It's just a matter of how much you protect yourself, what you're going in there doing, what your intention is. That's everything. So not to, weigh it down here.
Don't go alone, because you never know when it's going to overcome you when you are on an investigation, whether you're going for shits and giggles or you're going to help somebody. Never go alone. And a lot of people I see on YouTube doing that, and I'm like, that is so dangerous, because you never know when something can overtake you. You sometimes see people in a video just frozen there, and they don't hear anything, or they don't even realize that they're no longer basically there. Like, the lights are out, nobody's home, and it takes somebody else to bring you back. I've seen that on Ouija boards. I've seen that so many different occasions.
How many times have you used the Ouija board, Tessa?
Twice in one night, and that was it.
I know Michael has used it a lot. He's got a lot of experience with it.
Yeah, I was in MRP in the Marine Corps, and this fella by the name of Blackhead actually died during training. He got ran over by a tank, but he had a Ouija board.
Oh, no.
And so the male and female barracks kept passing it back and forth. And we got it. It was during Hurricane Bonnie, so we were all locked down. And all the girls were on it and using it, and I'm observing. I was raised from the age of 7 to 13 LDS, and then I was kind of back and forth with it. So I was taught no D&D and no Ouija boards. I love D&D, but I won't play with a Ouija board again. But I got on there after the girls convinced me, and I asked if I could talk to my mom, and it said no. And so I was like, F you, then I'm going to go take a shower. When I came out of the shower, it was still there on my rack, and nobody was around, and I didn't know the rules. You don't get on it alone, so on and so forth. And so I got on it, and it was a really amazing experience. I believe that was my mom talking to me, and how quickly it was moving and telling me the names of my siblings and my dad, tell them I'm okay, everything's okay, and so on and so forth. But the strange thing about it was the girls came over and were calling my name, pushing me around. I didn't feel or hear anything. Until eventually I did. Then I got off the Ouija board. After that, I had my first sleep paralysis. I didn't see a dark figure, but I did experience the whole not being able to move. I could see and hear what was going on around me, but I could not move. And I struggled so hard. Like, I was sore for 2 weeks. All the muscles I was trying to use to break free. But like you hear a lot of people say, just relax, and then your body should come out of it. Also, a lot of people talk about saying prayers inside their head in order to break free from it. After that, I only had sleep paralysis one other time, and that was about 10 years later. But yeah, it was pretty interesting.
I've only used a real Ouija board. I think it was Milton Bradley, right? That put that out. I think it was Milton Bradley.
Hasbro.
And what Hasbro?
I think it was
the original.
Well, actually, you know, those boards have had a long history, Michael. People used to make their own and back in the history and call it something different, and then, you know, the games just you know, capitalized on them.
That's actually where I'm heading, believe it or not. So, all right, I only used a Ouija board once, and I was very young, and my friend and I absolutely got no response because we didn't know what in God's name we were doing. We were too young. We saw it as a toy. Now, as I got into the spirituality, by the time I was 13, 14 years old, you know, I was looking at other avenues, and I had spoken to my mother about Ouija boards because I had already known about some of the cases where people had used these boards and just it didn't turn out right, you know. And I said, you know, what's your thought on this? Again, my mother was a very spiritual person. She said, well, from what I understand is if you make your own, you craft it with your own hand, your own energy, that's a more pure link. You imbue it with intention, and you'd be okay to do something like that. So I did. I took up little pieces of paper and I spread them all around the table, and I had this nice heavy, it was like a brandy glass with a nice heavy bottom, and put it down, and I started going through it. And I shit you not, when I felt this thing rise enough that it was sliding, it felt like a hovercraft. You know what I mean? Like there was air coming down underneath it, pushing it like a hockey puck from the table hockey. I forget what the hell it's called, but
air hockey, yeah.
Yes, air hockey. Thank you. That's what it felt like, though, and it would just slide so gracefully. Now, given whatever my energy was that day, whether I had more to give or less to give, I would get more of an answer or more activity. And I did this for probably 4 or 5 times, 6 times before it just seemed to be so nonsensical what I was getting back for answers that I just couldn't make sense of it, and I abandoned it. But I never had any bad repercussions from that. I never felt weird when I walked away from it, as I have in other situations. What do you think a Ouija board is? Why is there only one, at least that we know of, one physical thing like this that everybody can get their hands on to communicate with the spiritual world? What is a Ouija board?
I don't know. A lot of people say it's just like using dowsing rods or any other paranormal tool. You're allowing something to come in and manipulate in order to give an answer. I just find it very interesting the way that they've always marketed it. Like, this is a parlor game, and this is just for fun, and you have to be ages 5, or is it 8 and up to use this. What better way to market something like that than to children who get freaked out and run away and don't close it out properly, and then you have who knows what coming through it. But I do know people like my mentor Kat. She ended up passing away from cancer, but she would use that thing like a cell phone. And she invited me over several times. Hey, you want to come over and use the Ouija board with us? And I was like, no, but can I film it? And so she never had me over for that. But her drawer would pop open and this board would pop out, and different random weird things happening with that. I don't know.
And you filmed that? You have that on film?
No.
No.
No, I'd go over there and visit her while she was going through her spell with cancer and stuff, and she'd tell me about the different toys that were going off. And I was in the bathtub and I heard this noise in the living room, and all her kids were at work, and she'd come out and the Ouija board is poking out of her drawer trying to get out. And this is one of those really heavy old dressers, so the drawers are pretty heavy, whatever it was. I don't know. I think something was wanting to communicate with her. But it was pretty intriguing, like how different people view it and how different people use it. Like I said, she'd use it like a cell phone and use it all the time. But yeah, she didn't like the idea of me just coming over to film it. She wanted me to participate. But yeah, I wasn't willing.
Hey, listen, I don't blame you. Speaking of possession, one of the most profound cases I've found in this topic is the case of Maurice Theriault. Are you familiar with him at all?
Mm-mm.
He was a French native who came to America in the 21st century, early part of 21st century, and at a very young age, unfortunately, he was abused heavily by his father, and he actually verbalized that he wanted to be a servant of Satan at a very young age. And from that moment, he started having very bad experiences. But at the same time, as he got older and continued on through life, he would exhibit incredible strength. He could pick up tractors by himself. He was picking up cars. He was moving farm equipment around that it would take hundreds of hands to just pick up. And eventually, he started exhibiting signs of what we know as demonic possession, where literally blood was coming from his eyes and his mouth, and he was spinning on the ground in the bathroom. His wife would find him there, call the police would come, they'd see this happening, have no explanation. And there's actually, his exorcism is on YouTube, which I'm going to get into in another broadcast. But you see, as the Warrens, who were very close to this case, I believe it was Ed Warren who wrote Satan's Harvest, which is all about this. They were there to exercise him, not once, not twice, but I think at least 3 times, if it wasn't a 4th, to get this going. And in the video, one of the most remarkable scenes, you see the man, he's there, he's got his face on, he's not there. He is there. That is not the person in that body. And you can see his cheeks start to sink in a little bit in real time. And then on the right side of his head, there's this huge fissure that forms, this bloody fissure, and it starts cracking his face open. And again, you're watching this in real time as the exorcism is happening. Now, long story short, he was okay for a little bit after that, but it returned to him a few years later, and he ended up trying to kill his wife and then offing himself with the same gun. She survived. Her name was Nancy, but he did not. But this is just one of these tragic stories of at least influence, if it's not demonic possession. But I'll be honest with you, I've read a lot of books. I've read a lot of articles on these things. And that particular book, as I was reading it, I could feel the negativity in my chest, my solar plexus, and my stomach, to the point where there were times I had to put the damn thing down. Even though I was interested in what came next, I had to put it down. I had to walk away for a few hours, clean myself of whatever that was, to pick up the book again and start reading it. The energy was so heavy.
Sounds like some intense stuff, man. That's for sure.
Yeah, we find cases like this all the time. And this is just one that I focus on because it's not as known, I think, as the Anna Michael Louise.
I think I saw a little thing about him. Does he have dark hair?
Mm-hmm.
A smaller guy. His wife would talk about, she'd be in there talking to him and he wouldn't be responding to her or anything. And then she'd go into the other room and he'd been there the whole time. So he even had like a doppelganger thing going on.
Yes.
And then he even went to the point of going to the police station and saying, can you please hold these guns because something bad's going to happen. And they did hold the guns, but something bad ended up happening anyways.
That's exactly who it is. Yes, that did happen too. And again, these are all things that are documented. And as I always say, if just one of these things is real, if one of these things can be proven true, it puts everything else as suspect at the very least, and the knowledge that there is something more. Now, it's enough for us to personally say, I believe something. But then you want to take that belief, as convicted as you are, and try to share it with others and see what they feel. Not necessarily that the end has to be they believe what you believe, but, I do this because I like to open people's minds up. I know what I know and I experience what I experience, but I want to share that with people. I want to hear other people's experiences too, because I think in doing that, we collectively open the door up wider and wider. And I think there's a lot of evidence for that, even with the government recently disclosing, topics such as UFOs and what have you, to the mainstream public. And it's becoming something that we can all talk about. But this is a very interesting time to be alive in this respect, I think. Yeah,
and it's hard as far as the paranormal and stuff goes. Like, I didn't come out of as a kid, it was normal. So I'd tell people that were my friends, new friends, and then they wouldn't be my friend anymore. And so I learned after a while to keep that stuff to myself. So I call it the paranormal closet. I stayed in there until about 2012. And then I was like, forget it. I don't care what anybody thinks anymore. And I'm going to help people. And then I got into doing the radio show too. Like you have that open forum for people to be able to talk about it, not only on the show, but in the chat room, to have a place where they feel comfortable hearing other people's experiences and then sharing theirs. It's a really, really large load off your shoulders. It's funny, different beliefs as far as the devil goes. I had an encounter as a kid, which started with seeing little goblins that I can only explain look like gremlins, but their ears were a little shorter. But this was on my granny's farm in Pettigrew, Arkansas. And of course, I'm up late at night again. Everybody else is asleep, and I see this light coming through my window. And I'm like, where the heck is that coming from? You know, the chicken yard's right next to the house, and there's no lights out in the chicken yard except for quite a distance away. And so I sneak down the bed and I peek out the window, and there's these little goblin things dancing around this huge bonfire in the chicken yard. And some of them have drums that they're banging on. Some of them have different weapons. And they all stop at once and turn and look. And as they stop and go to turn, I slam myself back in the bed. And, you know, the sheet of armor that every kid pulls up, pull that up and like be as still as possible. And you could see the shadows coming up to the window and reflecting off the wall and the scratching up the wall as they are. And they're chattering back and forth and looking around, don't see anything. So they went down to my brother's room, and he actually had a really difficult time every night. He'd be running through the house screaming after that they were after him, and they eventually caught him. My grandparents, the same point, he'd run out of his room past my room, then in through the baking room, into the kitchen, and then back through the kitchen. And there's a little step about this tall. And every time he'd trip over it, and the last time he tripped, my grandparents held him. And we're looking in the direction that these things are chasing him. I don't know if they saw him or not, but they got my brother. He just collapsed in their arms. And then after that, he didn't have an experience like that anymore. But it was, I believe, the same night, or it could have been the night after, I had this really crazy dream that I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden there's light at the end of my bed, and my bed starts tilting up slowly. And so I'm scooting down the bed, and the only thing that's keeping me from falling into this hole of fire and brimstone is the baseboard, which is about that far below my mattress. So I'm digging my thumbs in, trying not to fall in this hole, and I wake up, and I'm at the end of my bed, which is really strange because I'm a really still sleeper. Like, I won't really move. So I'm waking up and thinking about how vivid a dream it was and how scary it was. And then I realized that I still smelled smoke. And in my granny's farmhouse, we didn't have, well, my brother had a door. I didn't have one. I had just lace curtains tied back. And I could see this dark figure in the doorway just staring at me. And even before I saw his face, I knew who it was. But he lifted his cigar and took a puff off of it. And at that point, you could see his face and what he was wearing. And shit you not, he was like the most handsome man I had ever seen. But immediately I knew who it was. And so all the nightmares I used to have, my dad taught me to say, God stands before me, Satan fall behind. And I didn't even say it out loud. I said it in my head, and just like that, I was out, and I didn't have to deal with them. Years later, when my family came back together, I'm telling the story to my siblings and my dad, and my dad turned white as a sheet, and I'm like, Dad, are you okay? And he's like, your mom told the same story, except for he was right by her bed, and they had a very lengthy conversation. I think that had a lot to do with my mom's death. At first, as a kid, I thought it was the lady in black, but my sister was in the car accident with my mom, and she said on that corner where they had pulled out and the drunk driver had hit my mom, she said there was a limousine, which is unheard of way out there in Siloam Springs, but there was a stretch limousine and a man in a tuxedo standing by the limousine smoking a cigar. So I think he had come for my mom. My husband doesn't think that the devil goes out and does his own work, but I think he is looking for brides. And I think my mom was one of them. And he's come for me, and he's come for my sister. And I've told my kids these stories as well, so they know how to deal with it and not to communicate with this guy. But yeah, it's interesting how that happens, and how that can, like you said, for that guy was a really major downfall. He had that epic strength and other amazing things going for him. But what was the cost in the end, you know? And not very nice.
Oh my God. I mean,
Scary. So scary. I would hate to see the devil. Oh my God.
No, that's an incredible story. Oh my God, that's an incredible story. Dreams mean so much. Obviously the personal and everything can be perceived, you know, one or interpreted one way or another, but you know, something as clear as what you just experienced, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So detailed.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Wow.
I've had people say, well, how do you know it wasn't a dream? Well, I know I was dreaming and I woke up, and I've heard of the dream after dream after dream where you continually wake up and you're still in the dream. But I know this was real, you know.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
didn't go
yeah.
back to sleep that night when I was knocked out, you know.
No,
Knocked
when you wake
out, I
up
didn't
like
have to
that,
deal with
or
it.
from something like that, my God, it's it's very difficult to calm down. I mean, even something like sleep paralysis, and you wake up, gasping for air, because you couldn't move and couldn't breathe. It takes a considerable amount of time because there's a physical reaction that occurs. It's not just the mind is scared; the body feels it too sometimes. Wow, that's incredible, and I do know I do know what you mean. When you tell people that you're doing paranormal stuff or you have interest in these things, like, oh, okay, listen, I've met a handful of girls that I started talking to, like, oh, so what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a musician. I do a paranormal podcast. They're like, oh, it's great. All right, I'll see you later. I honestly find it funny. I really do. I find it so funny. But I think as time goes on, people are becoming more accepting of these sort of things. Obviously the advent of ghost hunting shows really sort of loosened people up, whether you believe it or not. Whatever was broadcast, it was there for them to interpret and then discuss the next day amongst maybe people that would never have talked about that sort of thing, but they saw it last night. So I think we're moving into a place of knowledge here where we're doing the preliminary work, even personally, doing this sort of stuff. I think we're going to really open up as a population over the next 20, 30 or 40 years, maybe in our lifetime here. I think we're really going to see this.
I can't wait to have Ouija boards on the wall next to my smart computer. Right? Wouldn't that be cool?
Ouija?
I used to make my own Ouija board like you did, Michael, but I would use
Really?
SpaghettiOs, ABCs, and 1, 2, 3s. And I would have a little shot glass, and I would move it around.
Yeah, dude.
Yes, no, hello, goodbye. That's when you're in pinch. If you ever need a Ouija board, grab one from the store. It's right there on the shelf for you.
Spaghettios. Just put it down on a piece of glass.
I get back to the sleep paralysis really quick. It happened to me twice, and it is a terrifying thing, Tessa. I felt like I was in a giant MRI machine. It was whoosh, 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 and then when you come out of it, yeah, and you can't move, and then you start to wiggle your little toe, and you're like, oh my God, I might be coming back. It's a terrifying feeling, absolutely.
Oh yeah. Was there anything that led up to that for you, Gutter? Did you have an experience prior to going to sleep or anything, or did it just
it happened? It happened twice out of the blue to me when I was like a younger kid. It just one time I was laying on the couch, I wake up, I'm like, oh my God, I can't move, and it happened to me a few years later, just like Tessa was saying. I have no idea, but maybe I was being abducted at the time. Who knows?
Yeah, no, that's always a possibility.
But a lot of people will just say, well, that's your body going into, you were dreaming and your body shuts off while you're dreaming, and there's nothing to it. But to me, when you have the feeling, there is something to it.
Sorry, Tessa, you were going to say something?
Oh, he was talking about the whirring noise, and I've heard that a lot with people who have seen UFOs and such. They'll hear that or whatnot. I've never really heard it associated with the paranormal, like ghosts and stuff like that, but I've heard it associated with UFOs.
Gutter, you hear what she just said, pal? You may be closer to this alien thing than dude. In terms of being abducted by aliens, and even in terms of being abducted for black projects such as MK Ultra or Montauk or something along those lines, it's done very cleanly. It's done very smoothly. A lot of times people don't have any recollection or even realize that there has been time lost. And of course, I mean, I'm not going to get too far into it right now, but when you talk about projects like Montauk or Monarch, they had the capabilities of shifting and altering timelines. So you could literally be one place and then being worked on and tortured in another and have memories of both times consecutively. I mean, we can get into that another time, but these are all things that are possible when people experience these sort of things. I mean, sleep paralysis is no joke, man. It's honestly nothing more terrifying to me. And I'm claustrophobic, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, my second one was definitely the scariest. We had gone to Farmington, New Mexico for a gig because my husband's in a band, and they had a band house in the back. And It's basically 2 rooms put together. The middle room is the bathroom, and that's how you walk from this place to this place. But our room didn't have any windows in it, and we had decided to lay down for a nap so we wouldn't be tired that night. And I'm looking at the light underneath the door, and all of a sudden I see this dark figure standing next to my bed, and he was darker than the dark. And I just at that point realized I couldn't move. And then this thing started speaking to me, not physically but telepathically, and he was saying that he would have me, and I said, "No, you won't." And he laughed, and when he did, you could see his teeth, like they were sharp and white and
Wow.
basically glowing. Like, how can you see his white teeth in the dark? But he leaned down and kissed me, and when he did, it sent a shock through my canine teeth all the way through my body. And at that point, it freed my feet. And so I started kicking my feet frantically, and my husband woke up and actually saw it and grabbed me and pulled me towards him, and this thing disappeared. But the scary thing for me was I felt like this thing was going to follow me home. So as I'm driving back to Durango, Colorado the next day, I keep looking in my rearview mirror thinking this thing is in my back seat or attached to my car, but I never saw it again, and I never experienced that again. But that for me was the scariest one as far as sleep paralysis. I'm just glad that he was there.
You hear about these things. You hear about people dealing with succubuses and incubuses, and what that experience is like. And then a lot of times people shy away when it gets to like the real detail of it, for fear of ridicule. But it happens. It does happen. And here's somebody, Tessa, who's experienced something very similar. There was an attempted spiritual rape, from what I could tell. And some of these entities will do that. I mean, keep in mind that sexual energy is creative energy, and creative energy is what drives, I think, a lot of what's out here and what we experience. I mean, to create life, you need sexual energy in one way, shape, or form. That's how powerful that is. And that's why it would make sense that when ETs first started taking people, they were complaining about them, taking certain fluids from their bodies and, abusing them in a sexual way. Obviously we know now is probably to make hybrids and things of that nature, but there's some sort of secret in sexual energy that I think we only know a little bit about. We're only seeing the very surface of, what someone can actually do in a positive respect with sexual energy as a creative force. But I'll throw this out here because I think I might have said this to maybe 2 or 3 other people, but I've never found anybody who experienced anything like this. On the topic of dreaming and sort of being half awake and such, I noticed when I was a teenager and I had just started first trying to get into astral projection, before I actually did astral project, and I say I had this experience, I would wake up in the morning. You see something up there, Gutter? I would wake up in the morning and my eyes... I'm sorry, my eyes would be closed and I would see my entire room. Okay. I could look around in vivid detail. However, everything was in a negative. Like if you're looking at a film and it looked like it was a negative. But I could move with thought around the room, but it would be in a negative. Have you ever heard anything like that? Ever experienced anything like that? I'm still looking for somebody. So
I have not.
Okay.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, I did it maybe 3 times. That was it. And then I mean, once in a while, I'll start getting that impression as I'm starting to wake up, but it takes a whole lot of energy to hold it. You know what I mean?
That is very intriguing.
Have you ever
heard another case like that?
No, not in all of my research. I haven't found anyone say anything that was similar to that, where they were seeing things in sort of a negative and having sort of an outer body experience. Have you ever astral projected before? Do you meditate or anything like that?
I did on accident once. I was at my friend Glow's house. She actually went to California to go on vacation, so I was house sitting her 2 Doberman Pinschers. She expected me to go over there by myself and introduce myself to these dogs, and I'm like, no, I want you to be there when I first meet them, so when I come back, they won't try to eat me. But it was crazy. She had all the channels I like with all the paranormal stuff on it, so I'm sitting there watching this paranormal show, and all of a sudden I hear this scratch, and she lives in this small little travel trailer, and it's got like this corduroy type wallpaper on it. So it's got ridges, and I hear the scratch, and I look over towards the door, and the fly swatter's swinging like this, and the keys fell off onto the floor. And I'm like, holy shnikey. So I go over there and I pick it up, and before that I had felt some shifting in the trailer. But as I'm watching the show, I start getting a pain in my chest, and I wasn't sure what that was about, and I ended up falling asleep. And I come to on the floor on all fours, and I'm trying to move around, but I feel like a drunk baby. Like, if I go this way, I fall too far this way. If I go this way, I fall too far this way. And then I turn around and I see my body on the couch, and I'm like, oh my God, I had cardiac arrest, and I freaking died out here. And so I'm trying to get back to my body before it gets too cold or whatever. And as soon as I get back into my body, I wake up and I'm like, holy crap, like that was insane. I don't meditate because I don't know. I just feel like I don't have time. Everybody's like, you have time, just make time. And I'm not that patient. But as far as astral travel, like I've had things after me my whole life. So I'm afraid if I leave my body, something else is going to jump into it. And I've heard about the silver cable and how that's not possible because your spirit's still attached. So nothing else can get in there. But yeah, it's not something that I really want to do. I know people that do it and really enjoy it. But for me, it's not something that I seek out. But yeah, I accidentally did it that one time. I'm not sure how, but
I'm terrified of the same thing as Tessa. You know, if I astral project, maybe I won't be able to come back. So I'm not even going to try it. You know, I never heard about the silver Tesla before, but hey, I'm terrified. I don't want to try it.
Oh yeah, no, that's something I've heard many times too. That there is this luminous silver cord that connects you to your body, and you know, unless that cord's cut, nothing can get in, and you know, you're pretty safe. One of the interesting things that I've come across, though, is that sometimes when people astral project, and this is on possibly a higher level because it's reflective of what used to happen in Egypt, where they had the mystery schools, and one of the final tests they had was you'd go up into the king's chamber, and when they actually opened the chamber, they found this very fine, what looked like a silicone powder all over just one area at the end of the tabernacle. And what they understood through much research and esoteric knowledge is that when these initiates would take their final test, they were to astral project out into the universe. And they were to go on a journey in this way to retrieve information, to bring back an anchor into the body, and then, you know, carry that consciousness and be able to share it as they go forth. A lot of times they found that initiates would just have a great time out there in the ethers and they didn't want to come back. So they'd either send somebody to go get them or they wouldn't, and they would be lost. And I've heard stories of people astral projecting and going off for days at a time, only to return to a body that was weak, malnourished, and dehydrated.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
That's interesting, you know, and I understand too, because it's easy to ignore. You don't have the real tactile feeling of a body when you're astral projecting. You're aware of it, and you can, with thought, come right back into it. But you know, that's must be pretty cool out there, man. I don't want to come back.
I heard that's why I wasn't doing so well as far as crawling, because I was trying to manipulate my physical body when I wasn't in it. So I should have just tried to, you know, do the whole flying thing or whatever. But yeah, it took me a while to get back, but I made it back into my body. And I'm afraid if I leave it, I'm going to come back and it's going to say no vacancy or something. And
do you know how it might be? You know how you don't want to go to bed at night, but then when you fall asleep, you don't want to wake up, you know? Similar to that.
Yeah.
I like that analogy. That's probably pretty accurate, to be honest with you. There are plenty of times you have a dream that you don't want to wake up from.
Very true.
I mean, I'll share one more with you here. So in terms of dreams, I had a dream when I was about, again, 15 or 16 years old. I woke up, or I became aware that I was in a field at night. Now, usually what they tell you when you dream about night, when it's nighttime, you're actually somewhere else in a different dimension, or, you know, somehow physically still here. You're experiencing this actual time at the moment. So I'm in this field, and again, it's dark, but I noticed that there's a fence in front of me. You would open it up to let the cattle out or whatever. I don't remember what this is actually called, this gate. And I decided I was going to try to stand up. Then I realized I had no energy. It was like being drunk and not having slept for 4 months. I couldn't garner enough strength to just barely put my hand onto the gate to try to lift myself up. Now, as I tried to do this, because I was determined, it was dark, and I actually in the dream started to get a little fearful because I didn't know where the hell I was. I got my arm onto the gate, and as I went to try to lift myself up, all of a sudden I felt someone grab my arm and pull me straight up. And as soon as that person touched me, I had all my strength back, 100%. I was perfectly well. I stood straight up and I looked right at them. And at the moment, as I looked at them, they had me by the wrist and they started pulling me from what I could ascertain was the edge of the field, again, in pitch darkness. Now, the funny thing was I had the cognizance to say, wait a minute, what the hell's going on? I couldn't see this person's face. They were about the same size as I was, height-wise. And so I said, hey, wait a minute, who are you? And this person in the dream stopped, turned around, looked me directly in the eye, still holding my wrist, and says, you know who I am. It was a girl that I recognized, but I didn't have a name. I didn't know who she was. I've never seen her in my life. So, she brings me out to the edge of the field and disappears. And now I'm in street lights and I go into a house and the dream continues in some silly fashion. But I remember this block of the dream, and I always thought that was really strange. So some years later, I had a reading, and the woman looked at me. She goes, oh, did you know you have a girl around you? I said, what do you mean? She says, well, there was this girl that you've spent many lifetimes with. You guys are very, very close. And unfortunately, this time around, it just wasn't in the plan that she could be in this incarnation. So she's decided to hang out with you as you're going through life. I said, no kidding. She goes, you might have seen her in a dream. I said, you got to be kidding me, man. You got to be kidding me. I didn't tell her anything about that. I shared it with her after the reading. On our departure, I said, listen, this really resonates with me because I've seen this girl. And that wasn't the last time I saw her either. So that was the first time. But dreams are so powerful and hold so much for us. I mean, I think we should pay more attention a lot of times, honestly. Especially us working in this field too,
Yeah, go ahead, Gutter.
No, I was just going to say, I've had psychic dreams, so there's something to it. There's something out there that's going to try to warn you if it can. So you got to listen to them. I 100% agree with Michael on that one.
Yeah, and I tell people a lot, especially when they've lost someone, pay attention to your dreams. Like, have they come to you in a dream? My mom came and saw me. It was probably like 3 months after she passed away. But, I mean, I think that's the easiest way for them to manifest and be able to get messages across is through dreams. It's like another realm where the spirit world and the human world can meet. And you can actually, understand what they're saying above more than a whisper. Or, sometimes you'll smell smoke or a different smell that you recognize from somebody that's passed away. But you don't quite get the message that they're trying to give you all the time. It's funny though, when I do get messages, it comes through as my voice, but I could tell by the cadence or whatnot who it is or what they're saying. But yeah, in the dream world, it's amazing. Like the possibilities are endless, and it's the easiest way for our loved ones to come through and to get that message. My mom talked to me second time I saw her. She didn't. And then I saw my dad once in my dream and he didn't talk to me either. So I think it just really all depends on what they're going through on the other side. Some people say they're going to school. Some people have different things they have to learn. Some people are doing an astral hop. That's why I think it's funny when people go and investigate cemeteries, like who's going to hang out there? Like you could be doing an astral hop or doing all these other things. Like you really want to hang out at the cemetery. And then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder if when people drive through that entrance to the cemetery, if it's kind of like ding dong, somebody's at the cemetery, come see who it is, I'm not sure how it works, but it's pretty intriguing. I just find a lot of comfort in the fact that there is another side and that we're not just being eaten up by worms and bugs in the ground,
It's very reassuring. Yes. That's right. I agree.
Oh, yes. Well, listen, I think we're going to wrap it up around here. We're about an hour and a half in, but I really want to thank you, Tessa, for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge, your experience with us. I've had an incredible time, an absolutely incredible time. I feel like I'm more knowledgeable than when we began. And, that's sometimes the goal too. So
I learned a lot.
Very much.
I learned a lot. It was a great show. Thank you, Tessa.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really did have a good time with you guys here in the hot box.
Yeah, you're telling me. Believe me, I got the one open window covered.
Yeah, I got the one open window, and then like you, I got my old rickety fan that I have to turn off, or else the whole world hears it. So thanks again, Michael and Gutter. What the hell was that?
My drone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, buddy.
Oh no, it's flying away.
Guys, don't forget to check the description for all the links. You will find Tessa's work in there as well as all of our friends. Please go and support, hitting like, subscribe to my show, these guys' shows, and everything connected. And I think a handful of you guys already have recognized the faces. And that being said, we've had Big Cat in the chat tonight, Shannon Sullivan, Martin Reeder, we had Carlos as well, Rodrigo Vieira. We'll try to find a couple few of you guys here because you guys have been very good participating, but
They're
we've
awesome.
been engaged.
The chat room is so awesome.
What's that?
You guys
Game Vet.
You guys are all so cool. Thank you for always showing up and supporting us. You know, we need to get these shows out there more. So keep sharing them, please, guys.
Yep, and we all help each other. I think that's the point. We're all aiming towards the same goal. We're just coming from different angles, and that's the most beautiful part about it. Again, Tessa, thank you very much for coming on. Gutter, as always, buddy, you're my what's the word? Confidant. Is that what I'm looking for?
Consigliere. More shows coming. We got the Mothman coming up. More Mothman researchers coming up.
Yes, absolutely. We have a handful of good guests coming on in the future here, near future. So thank you very much, Gutter, for finding Tessa. And Tessa, thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show and talk with us. I think we're going to end it out now, but guys,
Just
have a great rest of
your that you'll be on Tessa's show on Sunday, Michael.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, I will be on Tessa's show
next victim
on Sunday. I'm so sorry. My God, my schedule is so full here. I look at the thing and I look away and I forgot what I just looked at. So sorry, that wasn't intentional. Yes, I will be on Tessa's show on Sunday night and we'll be having another great conversation. And I hope you guys tune in for that. Please do. We'll be there.
We'll be there for sure. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Well, thank you very much. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening. I'm going to throw on some tunes here.
Night and night.
Out we go.
Hope you guys like the view. Too bad I wasn't in the bar tonight. That's where all the haunted ghosts are. But next time.
Well, it's really nice and refreshing compared to here.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. But I'm going to jump out. I'm starving to death. I got to eat something. So I'll see you guys soon.
Good night, guys.
All right. I think that maybe Michael's stream might have ended. So I'm the last Mohican. Later, guys.
What happened? My internet literally just went out. That was like the perfect time. All right, guys, have a great night. Tessa, thank you again for coming on. I don't think I'm going to try to get the music going here. It just crashed on me. So give me 1 second here and we'll get you going. I don't have any catchy phrase like Rich or Rick. So let me get you going. We'll use that for now. Have a good night, everyone.